Today, I'm reviewing my 1995 Nissan Skyline R33 GT-R, the most misunderstood and probably underrated GT-R in the model lineup. The R33 is often referred to as the ugliest or least desirable of the GT-Rs, but I think there's a whole lot more to the story. So let's take a look at this JDM icon and see what makes it special and why I think it deserves more respect. Let's start with the looks. The R33 has always been the black sheep, coming after the more compact, lighter R32 and before the shorter but heavier R34. People love to call it a boat because it's longer and wider, about 10 centimetres longer and 5 centimetres wider than the R32, with a longer wheelbase and a wider track. But that extra size means not only a more comfortable ride and more backseat room, but faster lap times through greater stability. Design-wise, the R33 GT-R stands out from the regular R33 Skyline with bigger upper and lower grills for more airflow, lower air intakes for brake cooling, a front fender bulge and those flared rear quarter panels. I personally think the rear lights are the best of any GT-R generation. They have this interesting 3D afterburner effect. And here are a couple of fun facts. Those rear lights are actually not perfect circles, they're ovals. Also, the headlights were apparently designed to look like two eyes peering out of a race helmet. So there's a couple of tidbits for you anoraks out there. The boot line is lower than the sides, and the rear wing is adjustable with 4 different angles for drag and downforce. The R33's coefficient of drag is 0.35, which was pretty impressive for the time. This particular car is a 1995 Series 1 non-V-Spec, so it's one of the first R33 GT-Rs. The regular R33 Skyline came out in 1993, and the GT-R concept debuted at the Tokyo Motor Show that same year, looking a lot like the R32, with a similar front grille. But Nissan took 2 more years to develop the R33 GT-R, with one big goal, a sub 8-minute Nürburgring lap time. That was a huge leap over the R32 and it put the Porsche 911 squarely in Nissan's sights. In fact, the R33 GT-R was the first production car to break that 8-minute barrier. Only about 16,000 R33 GT-Rs were produced between 1995 and 1998, which is just over a third of the number of R32s Nissan produced, making it the rarest of all the GT-Rs. When Nissan set out to create the R33 GT-R, they faced a huge challenge. The R32 GT-R was a legend, dominating Group A racing and earning a cult following for its raw, uncompromising performance. The R33 had to live up to that legacy, and ideally surpass it, not just in terms of speed, but also in refinement, technology, and everyday usability. The R33 was always going to struggle to achieve the racing pedigree enjoyed by its predecessor. The R32 GT-R was developed specifically to dominate Group A racing, and it did just that, earning the nickname Godzilla for its total dominance in Japan and Australia. By the time the R33 arrived, Group A regulations were being phased out or had already ended in many major series. The racing landscape was shifting, and the categories that made the R32 a star simply didn't exist in the same way for the R33. The R33 GT-R competed in the N1 Taikyu Endurance Series in Japan, which focused more on production-based endurance racing rather than the sprint-style, heavily modified Group A races. While the R33 was successful in N1 Taikyu, this series didn't have the same international profile or level of competition as Group A, so its victories didn't capture the world's attention in the same way. When development of the R33 began, Nissan originally planned for the coupe to have a shorter wheelbase than the sedan, and no turbo model was even considered. That all changed when they decided to put the coupe on the same wheelbase as the sedan, which set the stage for the GT-R. The R32 was designed around a zero-lift concept, with a big rear spoiler for stability, but it had a high coefficient of drag, 0.40, which wasn't even great back then. The R33, facing the new N1 Taikyu Endurance Racing Series, needed to be stable at sustained speeds over 250 km per hour, so Nissan put a huge emphasis on balanced aerodynamics and cooling. The design theme was sophisticated strength, superior aero, cooling, and a wider tread, but designers also wanted a look that suggested speed and power. Chief designer Hidetoshi Nishizumi said the R32 had excessive front lift, so the R33's longer front overhang and large front bumper openings were developed to reduce lift and improve cooling. The rear spoiler is a Y shape, adjustable for track days, and the production car ended up looking much more aggressive than the prototype, with a wider, lower body for a lower centre of gravity. Wind tunnel and road testing led to a coefficient of drag of 0.35, beating the R32's 0.40, and a much better front to rear downforce balance. The front coefficient of lift dropped to 0.09 and rear downforce was 0.03 with the spoiler flat. Even with the bigger body, the R33 was more stable and better balanced at speed. Nissan's high traction layout was all about improving chassis performance. The R33 GT-R's body rigidity was increased by 40% over the R33 GT-S and a massive 150% over the R32 GT-R. This was achieved by adding extra bracing, including front and rear strut tower bars and several crossbars under the floor and around the suspension. Nissan also upgraded the front suspension from an I shape to a stronger A-shaped upper arm, which improved side-to-side rigidity by 90%. These changes made the car feel solid and responsive, especially during hard driving. The R32 was criticised for being too front-heavy, with a 60-40 weight distribution and a big fuel tank behind the rear wheels. The R33 fixed this by moving the fuel tank under the rear seats, relocating the battery to the boot, and moving as much weight as possible toward the centre. The result was a 55-45 weight distribution and a lower moment of inertia, making the car feel more nimble and direct. To offset the extra bracing and rigidity, Nissan engineers went on a weight-saving mission. Aluminium bonnet and fenders, plastic headlights, lighter intercooler, hollowed side door beams, less sound deadening, electric super high CAS, hollow rear stabiliser bar, lighter ABS actuator, aluminium wheels, and more. Even the engine mount insulators and brackets are aluminium, and the fuel tank is plastic. The R33 ended up about 100 kilograms heavier than the R32, but only 30 kilograms of that was up front, with the 70 extra kilograms in the rear. There were a couple of minor drawbacks. The battery is difficult to access, the rear strut bar takes up boot space, and the fuel tank shrank from 72 litres to 65 litres, so range is a bit lower. The RB26DE-TT engine is basically the same as in the R32, but with more boost and better flowing turbos for more torque and response. The ECU was upgraded from 8-bit to 16-bit for better control and reliability, and the block is rumoured to be more rigid than the R32's. In stock form, the race-bred 2.6 litre dual overhead cam 24-valve inline 6 pumped out about 220 kilowatts. The official line was 206 kilowatts to keep the wowsers happy, and 368 newton meters of torque, which was a reported 15 newton meter improvement over the R32. This car has clearly had a bit of engine work done, with aftermarket Dash 5 turbos, intakes and exhaust. The clutch has been upgraded too, and it's quite heavy and a little like an on-off switch. The Atessa ETS Pro all-wheel drive system is a big step up. What's that? It is Advanced Total Traction Engineering System and Electronic Torque Split Pro. The hardware is similar to the R32, but the software is much smarter. The R32 was notorious for understeer and abrupt torque split. The R33 system locks up the transfer case earlier and uses better sensors, making the car more precise and predictable, especially at the limit. The V-Spec models got an electronically controlled active LSD, but even the standard R33's Atessa is a big improvement. Super high-CAS four-wheel steering also went from hydraulic to electric, making it lighter, more precise and safer at the limit thanks to a yaw sensor and smarter control. HiCAS is another acronym which stands for High Capacity Actively Controlled Steering, and the R33 system is much less likely to surprise you mid-corner. Brakes are Brembos all around, with 4 pistons up front and 2 pots in the rear, carried over from the R32 V-Spec. They perform well on the street, but I haven't had a chance to test them out on track. The stock wheels were lighter to reduce unsprung mass, but this car is sporting NK RPF1 rims. Suspension changes included new spring rates, LSD setup and damper tuning. Inside, well, it's pretty bland. Honestly, it reminds me of a garden variety Nissan Maxima, but there are a few things to remind you you're in something special. The tach goes to 10,000 RPM, you get triple meters for boost, oil temp and front torque, and the seats are deep buckets with semi-suede material and they're super supportive, but the headrests are definitely designed for shorter, Japanese people. The seatbelt extenders are unique but feel a bit flimsy and fragile. The 5-speed gearbox has long mechanical throws and it's an absolute joy to rev the motor through to the 8,000 RPM redline. And there are plenty of coin slots. Must have been a lot of tolls in Japan, or GT-R drivers are fiends for pachinko. This car has an aftermarket Minds dash cluster, which is a bit dark and hard to read, but the special GT-R key is very cool. The digital aircon is peak 90s. Simple, clear, and it just works. This car has an aftermarket stereo, which is fine, but I wish it still had the standard radio and cassette player for the sake of originality. By far, the biggest disappointment in the interior is the stock steering wheel. It's an airbag wheel, and because of this, it looks bulky and bad. I also think the diameter of the wheel is simply too big, and hence the steering is not direct enough. Later series R33s received a marginally better steering wheel, but I am very tempted to replace this one with an R34 item, which I'm sure you'll agree would look much better, but I think there may be some complications with the airbags and potentially high CAS. It might be too much work. If you have any info, I'd appreciate your thoughts in the comments. Overall, the interior is drab, plain and cheap, but Nissan clearly spent the money on developing the driveline and engine, which is the right call if you ask me. The boot is big and practical, visibility is good, and thanks to the longer wheelbase, there's more backseat room than the R32 or R34. The rear strut bar is a nice touch, but again, the battery is in the boot and is a pain to access. So what's it like to drive? Well, the 33 GT-R is heavier than the 32, about 100 kilograms heavier in fact, but it is stiffer and it's certainly more refined. The car does feel planted, especially during fast sweeping corners, and that's probably helped by the longer wheelbase and wider track. The gearing of the 5-speed gearbox is quite long, but the car is fast once you're on boost, say above about 3,800 RPM. A stock 33 GT-R does 0 to 100 in about 5.3 seconds. So the car is fast. It's certainly not R35 GT-R fast, but certainly 2018 manual Mustang GT fast. The steering is quite good. You get plenty of feel and feedback. However, I do think the car would really benefit from a smaller steering wheel, which would give the steering just such a more direct feel, and it would look heaps better too. This car feels compact by modern standards. Much is made about the weight gain over the 32 GT-R, but compared to modern sports cars, this car feels light, and that feeling of lightness flows through to the way that it steers, stops, and goes. Sports cars of today have become quite bloated. I mean, look at the 3 Series of today versus 30 years ago. They're so much bigger and so much heavier, and it just robs you of so much feeling. This 33 GT-R feels so visceral compared to a lot of modern sports cars. Compared to the R32, the R33 is more mature and more comfortable, but still a true performance car. The R32 is raw and race bred, the R34 is high-tech, hyped and hyper expensive. So the R33 could be the sweet spot if you do a lot of driving or take long trips. I haven't driven an R34 though to compare. From the R33 to the R34, the changes were more about refinement than revolution. The R34 got even better aerodynamics, more rigidity, a new GetRag 6-speed and ball bearing ceramic turbos, but the running gear was largely the same. Nissan's goal was to make the R34 easier to drive, not necessarily faster than the R33. The R34's Nürburgring time was only a few seconds quicker, and a lot of that was down to aero tweaks and suspension refinements. Advancing tyre technology may have also played a part in the extra pace. I sometimes wonder, why didn't Nissan bring the R33 GT-R to Australia? Nissan just never officially brought it here, which is a shame because it would have been perfect for our roads. Perhaps it would have been simply too expensive at the time. Nissan brought in a limited run of 100 R32 GT-Rs, and they were priced at 110,000 Australian dollars, which was huge money in 1991, and many were sitting on dealer lots for over 12 months. ADR compliance could have been another significant complication and expense. ADRs baffle me. Do we really have design requirements that are that different to the rest of the world? Or was it simply to help keep locally manufactured cars competitive? Anyway, that's a whole other video. So, is the R33 GT-R the ugly duckling, or is it the smart money GT-R? For me, it's definitely the latter. It's rare, it's fast, it's comfortable, and it's packed with cool tech for its time, which doesn't dilute your driving enjoyment. If you're looking for a GT-R, the R33 is worth looking into and a fantastic choice. And it's only getting more collectible, and for 70 to 80,000 Australian dollars, you can pick yourself up a very clean example. I hope you enjoyed the video. I have another video on an interesting JDM import coming soon. Thank you for watching. I'd really appreciate a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.